Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As we begin, a brief reminder to please silence your mobile devices. I'm Court Tan, the museum's Director of Annual Giving. It's my privilege to welcome a room full of museum members to this program. Just yesterday, I had the distinct joy of welcoming the first wave of members to the Caillebotte member previews, over 200 people in the first 30 minutes. And today's sold-out program is another reminder that members keep the museum thriving as a cultural resource for the entire community. It's been a remarkable season. We welcomed ancient Roman sculptures from Italy's Torlonia collection, brought Frida Kahlo to our galleries for the very first time, and just this month unveiled Rakib Shah's Paradise Lost, a massive, breathtaking 21-panel series 16 years in the making. And of course, Gustave Caillebotte takes center stage now, offering us an intimate look into his life as a painter of private moments and personal relationships. While you are enjoying the museum this summer, I hope you all spend some time in the member bar on the third floor of the Modern Wing, or in the newly opened Garden Bar for a glass of wine or beer. The Garden Bar is open every Thursday from 3 to 7 in the Pritzker Garden on the first floor of the Modern Wing. It is now my pleasure to introduce our presenters, Gloria Groom and Megan True, for an exclusive look into Gustave Caillebotte painting his world. As the chair and Winton Green Curator, Painting and Sculpture of Europe, and Executive Director of Initiatives in France at the Art Institute of Chicago, Gloria Groom has been involved in numerous major exhibitions and their accompanying catalogs. As members, I am sure many of you have experienced at least one of the exhibitions Gloria has helped bring to life, such as Gauguin, Artist and Alchemist, Van Gogh's Bedrooms, Impressionism, Fashion and Modernity, and Seurat, and the making of Le Grand Jatte. Earlier this year, I had the pleasure of walking through Paris with Gloria and a group of our leadership members, as we followed in the very footsteps of Caillebotte through his neighborhood and at his family home. You are all in for a treat today. Joining Gloria in conversation is Megan True, curatorial assistant in the Department of Painting and Sculpture of Europe. Megan earned degrees from Butler University and George Washington University, where she specialized in 19th century French art. She has previously held positions at the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields, the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, and the Dallas Museum of Art. We're grateful today to recognize the John D. and Alexander C. Nichols Family Foundation for their lead support of Gustave Caillebotte painting his world. Raymond James is the lead corporate sponsor. We thank them both for their generous support. Now, please join me in welcoming Gloria and Megan to the stage.
Working? Yes. Welcome. Oh, I'm so happy that we're back. This is great. Thank you for coming. I guess I'll start. So, the exhibition, how many of you have seen it already? Oh my gosh. Okay. Good. The exhibition, I thought I'd give you a little bit of a history of why we did the exhibition. Then we're going to be talking, Megan and I will be talking about some of the important points to keep in mind as you're going through the exhibition, some of our insights. And it won't be a complete overview, but we'll get there, and we're hoping to get through 35 slides. And
yeah, we'll do our best to keep the pace going.
Yeah. Last night we gave it. I was with a round table, and we got through 8 slides in 60 minutes, and we were like, oh, we have 37. Okay, well, so we're going to do better. We're going to do better.
Yes.
So the 2 paintings you're looking at are really the genesis of the exhibition, which began in October in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. The Getty had bought The Man at His Window in 2017. It was a stellar acquisition. It had been in a private Houston collection for a long time, and a man who would not lend. We don't like those kind of people. And so it was relatively unknown. And then the Musée d'Orsay was able to acquire the wonderful Partie en Bateau, the boating party, with the help of LVMH, and that really got them thinking at the Musée d'Orsay that Caillebotte, having grown up with brothers, gone to a boys' school, trained as a lawyer, then as an artist, all of those things we'll be talking about, he really paints men, the men in his circles, the many circles. He's a lot about brotherhood, about fraternité. And so they came to me and said, we're going to do this exhibition highlighting our new acquisitions, and we want to borrow yours. And I'm like, no. We would like to be part of this because you can't do this exhibition really without the largest painting, multifigural painting he ever did that's been here since 1964. So okay, so here are the two catalogs, the one on the left, Peindre les Hommes, and the other one, Painting Men, same title. And I just want to talk about our title. We, from the get-go, knew that we thought that was, I don't want to say restrictive, because there are a lot of men. I mean, he did do something that other Impressionists were not doing, which is to paint the modern male. And he really identified with him, with the modern male. But we really wanted it to be about his relationships, about, his experience. And his experience, of course, included women, children, dogs. So that's, just get it out there. So the title is different here, and that's not unusual. We often change the title to meet our publics. We think will appeal best to our public, but it's also the same catalog of the exhibition, and it's the same exhibition, give or take one or two changes between the different venues. Let's get started. So I am not foreign to Caillebotte. In 1995, one of the first exhibitions I worked on was Caillebotte Urban Impressionists, which Douglas Druick and I curated here in Regenstein Galleries, one of the first exhibitions there. Did anyone see that exhibition? A couple, good, yeah. So this was the exhibition that really put him on the map. Until that time, it was Paris had the Floor Scrapers, Chicago since 1964 had Paris Street Rainy Day. But other than that, and then, we talk about it as the artist that did the umbrellas, he was still not at all known in France, and it was our painting plastered around the post on buildings that really brought him into the public consciousness, and with this exhibition that was also held at the Grand Palais in Paris. But it was a retrospective, and as you can see, it included his amazing landscapes and his just a lot of different ways, his still lives, landscapes, and his portraits, and his genre scenes. So it was really an overview, just to kind of introduce an artist that up to that time was relatively the unknown Impressionist. So this exhibition, we're happy that we really wanted to do something that hadn't been done, because since then, that launched about at least 10 other exhibitions.
At least, yes. Yeah. Mostly in Europe, but a couple in America.
Slicing and dicing, still lives, landscapes. So they're taking different parts of him. Most recently in 2016 at the National Gallery, Caillebotte, The Painter's Eye. So we wanted to do something, and the theme was brought to us by the Musée d'Orsay, that we would really focus on his figure paintings, of which in his relatively short career, because as you remember, he dies at age of 45, so it's less than a 20-year career. A little under a third of his paintings are of figures, and of those, a lot of them are of men. I just wanted to show this because I love this painting. After the 1995 exhibition, we really went to the family, because the family still owns a lot of paintings and drawings that are in this exhibition, and it's thanks to the descendants that these are being made available. And we loved this. And so 2 years after the exhibition, after we had begged one of the family members to sell us this calf's head beef tongue, which we find is the perfect complement to the modernity of our street scene, he called up and said, yeah, I want to sell it. I don't know what the circumstances are. I don't care to know, but it was great, so we could acquire this. But that's not in the exhibition, because this is really not a figure painting. No. There's no way we can spin this into one. So Megan, who's been with us for 2.5 years, almost 2.5 years now?
Almost 3.
So this exhibition actually came together in 3 short years, which, as you know, usually is 4 or 5. So thank heavens for Megan, who did a lot of research, who was really able to help us understand the biography better and really dig deeper into the identities of the people that we showed, some of which we showed in 1995, but only, as I said, in a more survey fashion.
Yes, it has been such an excellent opportunity to get to work on this exhibition with Gloria, particularly here at the Art Institute. I mean, the exhibitions team here is just spectacular. But yeah, so we'll start out and give you a little bit more background on who Caillebotte was and why that was so important for understanding his art. So Caillebotte was born in 1848 in Paris. His parents, Martial and Celeste Caillebotte, had kind of acquired wealth throughout their own lives. The wealth wasn't generational. Martial worked very hard to build up the family fortune, first through managing a textile manufacturer, and then through real estate investments. They owned several apartment buildings that later passed to their sons, allowing them to have some passive income so that they would never have to work. And Caillebotte began his career kind of in law. He thought that he was going to be a lawyer until he enlisted in the army and began serving in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. It's thought that it's during this time in the military that he began painting, and by the time he got out of the military in 1871, he decided to enroll in the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris and would study in the studio of the artist Léon Bonnat, who was a much more traditional academic painter. So he had a very strong foundation in traditional artistic training. But he did not have to sell his work or market his work because of his family's independent wealth. And because of this, he was able to kind of exclusively paint subjects that were close to him, that he was interested in and were very personal to him. So particularly in the very beginning of his career, you see him almost exclusively painting his family. So here we have a portrait of his mother shortly before her death the next year in 1878, and a very small, very interesting painting that's surprisingly claustrophobic when you look at it in the exhibition because it's very small, but a kind of family meal with his mother and then his middle brother, Rene. He had 2 brothers, 2 younger brothers. So Rene was the middle child. He was 3 years younger than Caillebotte, and then Martial was the youngest, and he was 5 years younger than Caillebotte. All 3 of the brothers were very much encouraged to follow their passions. Rene never quite found his way and then ended up tragically passing away very young at the age of 25. And this was incredibly impactful for Gustave. He was only 28 at the time, and that his brother's death was kind of the impetus for him to write his first will. At just 28 years old, he was already thinking of his legacy. And he painted his brothers. His youngest brother, Martial, was the only one who survived along with him. They would live together for most of their lives. But Martial was also called to the arts. He studied at the Paris Conservatory and would become a composer. And he was later a photographer as well towards the end of his life. So we have an early painting of him at the piano, and then a much later photograph of him still practicing the piano.
Yeah, you can see. Sorry, you can see. I love the young man as piano, which is now in Japanese Tokyo collection, and it was not shown in Paris, so we're really happy to have it here. And it's it's really that and the luncheon scene. Those already show what he is going to be known for are these incredible light effects, this incredible light coming through the window, the glints, the reflections on his fingers, on the keyboard, onto this grand piano. this compressed space that can't possibly really exist. I mean, where is the artist? How is he, is he right next to that piano? But these are the characteristics that make Caillebotte so interesting, because thinking about it, Caillebotte was 10 years later coming to the Impressionist table. They had been painting in the forest of Fontainebleau. They had been doing plein air paintings for 10 years. He gets started right about the time they're fully branded as a group. And so he's trying, to do something different, but he's also got a very academic background, and he's also very comfortable. Who wants to live with their parents for that long? He does, because they live in a mansion, and it's okay, and he invites the Impressionists there for their first dinner. I mean, no one was doing that. Monet was long gone. They were all out of their parents' homes. So he's a different kind of artist because of his upbringing, but also because of his personality. I think he was very comfortable with his social standing.
Oh, definitely. He was very confident.
Yeah.
And just was very willing to put himself out there in this way and switch to an artistic career. His family was very supportive of it, as Gloria might address a little later when we're talking about his famous painting, Floor Scrapers. The room that they're preparing is actually a studio for him that his father ordered so that he would have a space dedicated to painting.
Yeah. Should we show the next one? Oh, yeah. So one of the things that's great, there's me. One of the things... So one of the things that I loved is that, as Court said, when we went more recently to Paris, we kind of retraced the steps. But a year and a half before that, the curators, and we walked Caillebotte's Paris, but we also went into some of Caillebotte's houses because they still exist. He was wealthy enough that the family mansion on the Rue de Miramenil still exists near the Opéra. And so we talked our way in through concierge who was smoking, whatever, and we got into the courtyard, and then we just started, pressing buttons, and we got this lawyer, this law office, and he was like, "Yeah, come on up. I know." And he had a big poster, and he let me stand there. So the only thing different is that the grill work is new. It was no longer the stone balustrade. But if it wasn't for that, it's still a Boulevard Malesherbes, that street that's cutting through it. It's still the same window framing. It's still the French windows which reflect me and René. So this is an incredible realist painting because we can put ourselves into it. And that's one of the things about the exhibition that is so exciting, because when we get to the views of Paris, it's the Paris we know, and we can really retrace the artists in ways you can't do with... Well, Monet you can at Giverny, because by that time he was wealthy and he had a property that stays there, but most things, studios, they no longer exist. So yeah, it's kind of a fun thing.
Oh, definitely no. Caillebotte's Paris was something that was very personal to him, but also something that, again, still exists today. It is the Paris that we know and love.
So you want to talk about René?
Sure, yeah. So this is René. He is, again, the middle brother of the Caillebottes. He passed away at 25.
Shortly after this was
Just shortly
painted.
after, yes. So... shortly after this was exhibited, René passed away, and this was the only painting that Caillebotte had made of René. So it's very special in that way, allowing him to kind of show his brother in this family home that they both knew and loved so well.
So Martial is probably painting in his room, and this is René's room on the third floor of this place that now has a plaque. So if you're going there, he lived there. But it's also unusual because you can see how he's working with the contre-jour, like he's in the interior and it's dark and he's looking out. And you saw that in the family, that small family portrait where he's really playing with light. So it's not the light of a Monet and the dappled light coming through the foliage in the forest, but it's that same interest in what light does and where it's coming from, only in a much more reduced, very, as you said, very personal.
Yes. Yeah, even in these early paintings where he is still kind of working in a more realist style, the surface is much more finished than you would think of for a typical Impressionist painting. He's still interested, and you can see a kinship with the Impressionists in the choice of very modern subject matter and this interest in really expressing the light of the moment, the atmosphere of the moment.
Yeah, it's a painting that you should get right up close to, though, because there's stuff going on. He's looking at a woman, maybe, who's crossing the street. There's a lot of detail that you don't really get in this slide. So you want to talk about his family property? So this was his Paris property.
Yes.
That he lived with until everyone dies. So his father dies in 1974. 2 years later, his brother dies mysteriously. And 2 years after that, his mother dies. So he's thinking, as he said, the Caillebotte family dies young. I mean, and he wasn't kidding. And he died young.
Yes, yeah. The family did have quite a few rough years in there.
Yeah.
But
he doesn't buy everything.
Yeah. While they were growing up, they did acquire enough wealth to purchase a country estate in Hyères, which is a southern suburb of Paris. And this estate that they purchased was right on the Hyères River, which kind of allowed Gustave to develop his love for water sports, which he really fosters throughout his life. You can see that through a lot of his painting. And in particular, at this time, he was very interested in rowing. And during this period where he is painting in Hyères, it's quite a contrast to what we have been looking at, these kind of slightly dark interiors where he's still playing with the light, but it's very much an indoor space. And with Hyères, he was able to get out into nature a bit more. And in these paintings, you can definitely see him starting to experiment with an Impressionist style a bit more. The brushstrokes become much thicker. The colors become a little bit more vibrant. And he's really kind of tapping into that en plein air painting that he's seeing the Impressionists do. And with these paintings, I mean, rowing was quite a common theme in Impressionist painting as well. You'll see Monet, Manet, Renoir also painting on a rowing theme. But what you see with them is it's usually well-dressed bourgeois men and women participating in rowing for a leisure activity. It was something that you could do to socialize and just kind of hang out on a nice day. And Caillebotte was kind of interested in that. You see that with the Paris painting, Boating Party a little bit, where you have the well-dressed gentleman with the top hat still on. But even in that painting, you can tell that he is a lot more interested in the physicality of rowing. He participated in it as a sport. In a lot of these paintings, almost all of them, you'll see the rowers are wearing a sort of uniform of these short-sleeve shirts, blue pants, and the very distinctive straw canotier rowing hats. And he really wanted to portray the motion and the labor that it took to operate these unbalanced little canoes that they were using.
Yeah, I think another characteristic of Caillebotte's personality is that he was very disciplined, as was his brother Martial, the pianist, and another brother who's 17 years older was a priest and very successful priest. So you have this family that could have been the idle rich, but they all really feel a need to engage in their passions and do it well. And I think what makes Caillebotte so special is that when he takes on rowing, he's really identifying with people that work. And you'll see the floor scrapers is a perfect example, but the idea of physicality, of athleticism, this is something that comes out again and again in his work, and you don't see that as much in a Renoir, where it's flirtatiousness, it's the story behind it. These tell stories too, but in a much more personal, again, back to his world, which is not necessarily the world of Impressionism. Oh, yeah. Do you want to segue to this? Yeah, sure. So this is probably the key, besides our painting, the key painting in the exhibition, because this is the painting when he was still with the studio. He just finished his academic training, and he's very good. He exhibits this. he submits it to the official state-sponsored exhibition called the Salon, and it gets rejected. And it's because of that rejection that he talks to Degas and talks to other artists in the circle, and they invite him to exhibit with them. So it's not the second exhibition of the Impressionists, he exhibits this. And you can see in this painting, he signs his name. It's like that big, because he thought it was going to be in the Salon, where you need to sign big because your paintings are going to be skied, not like in the Impressionist exhibition, which was much cozier and in homes, kind of home-like situation. So it's the biggest signature you're ever going to see. But it's also, why was it rejected? Because in terms of academic painting, I think you'll all agree, you've seen it, I mean, he really knows how to draw. And you saw the drawings in the exhibition that lead to this, the preparations. Do we have those? Oh, thank you. Thank you for driving here. I can't do both. And he's, really observing what it means to be scraping down a floor. And as Megan said, this is not just any old floor. This is the new area that his father was paying for so he could have his private studio in their house on the Rue Miromesnil. So these are the workers that are working for him that he's observing. So it was a subject that hadn't been really taken on before, because laborers are usually in the fields. They're not city laborers, or if they are, they're in the streets, like Manet's painting of the Rue Monnier. But this is inside at labor. And can you go back to the Rabatteur? Thank you. And it's also, again, thinking of that piano painting, reflections, the light coming in for the window. These are the characteristics that make a Caillebotte and why he matters to us. And the choreography of these workers, where they are really working just like the rowers, but there's a kind of elegance and a grace that he gives to them as he is identifying with them as creating something, as he will be creating something. And you see in the very front, I don't have the pointer, but there's it's probably not going to work. There's the tool, and it's kind of like almost a Dutch 17th century painting where you let in by this very perfectly three-dimensionalized objects to tell you that this is the tools of their labor. So it's an important painting, and it's also important because at his death, and as Megan said, he writes this will, he writes a second will, giving all of his paintings from his friends, Degas, Monet, Sisley, Pissarro, Cézanne, to the French state, because he wants their group to be part of the tradition, the next important tradition in French painting. And that's a whole other story, but he didn't include any of his paintings. This is the only painting that got included at his death in 1894, and it's only because Renoir and his brother Martial were the executors, and they felt like, he should have some representation. So there were two paintings. This is the one that he is best known for, until we bought our painting in 1964. So from 1894 to 1964, he was largely non-represented in America because his paintings didn't travel like Monet and Pissarro with the Durand Ruel, that whole story that we told with our Monet in Chicago story. That didn't happen for this artist. They stayed with his brother Martial until relatively recently.
Yes, they've only recently kind of started proliferating the market a bit more, especially since his star has been rising for quite a while now. His profile has risen because of exhibitions like Urban Impressionist and all of that work. He's finally being recognized for how important his contribution to Impressionism was. And it wasn't only from his collection, but his art as well was also quite unique and quite pioneering. As you can see, kind of from floor scrapers to these two as well, house painters and Pont de l'Europe, he is already very interested in experimenting with perspective, with movement. He was likely inspired by the newly popularized medium of photography, catching people coming in and out of frame, just really accurately portraying a bustling street scene.
Yeah. And this, again, it's very close to where he lives. So this is a wine shop directly below the street where his brother was looking out the window. So it's very close. And he identifies with the painters. You know, these are the people that are putting the gold letters on this wine shop. And there are lots of drawings for this in the exhibition. And you can just see, again, that I'm an artist and I work with my hands. I'm a craftsman. I'm a creator. I'm a maker, as are you. And he loves to show kind of their professional garb. He really identifies with his class, but also the working class, the people who are wearing smocks. And you see that in the painting from the Petit Palais in Geneva, the Pont de l'Europe. Again, 2 blocks from his home, you run into this very interesting crisscrossed bridge that was brand new. So he would have been living in his family home when that was being constructed. And it was like we all watched Millennium Park go up in that sort of Fred Flintstone hole in the ground. I don't know if you remember that, but it was amazing. You know, it went from this parking lot into this amazing park. So he would have watched that, and now he's celebrating that. But at the same time, again, that exaggeration of space that we saw from the very get-go, he really loves to make these long expanses and then have this kind of accelerated diagonals into the background and the variety of people. It's been said this is a self-portrait. It's the closest we get to a self-portrait in a genre painting. So
Definitely.
Yeah. And I was talking to someone the other day, and they said the tip of the dog's tail looks like a paintbrush.
It kind of does, yes.
I kind of like that.
It's funny.
It's like, okay. Yeah. So it's a brand new bridge, and he's celebrating that in this painting, which he never exhibited. He exhibited the other 2 paintings at the same time he exhibited the Art Institute painting. This one, for some reason, it's on a big scale. You've seen it in the exhibition, but it's so interesting because it's sort of reduced to those steel girders, which was the latest in technology. You know, think about, this is before the Eiffel Tower, this is before that kind of amazing skyscraper engineering, but the idea that you could make this huge bridge across multiple railroad tracks, and they're looking at the smoke coming up from the Gare Saint-Lazare, which, again, is very close to his home. Showing, as you saw in the exhibition, we got obsessed with the hats because hats were really telling you what the profession was. And so here you have the derby and the top hat, again, showing different types of people who are occupying the same space in the new Paris that exists today.
Yeah, and at the same time that he was kind of painting these larger scenes like Pont de l'Europe, like Paris Street, Rainy Day, that are quite large, highly finished. You can kind of see him starting to experiment with looser brushstrokes a little bit, but at the same time, he's also starting to experiment with his style a little bit more, and we get scenes like these 2 smaller paintings that both show different views of the Place Saint-Augustin, which again was not far from his home at all. He passed through the square regularly on his way to different places. But in these, you really see him loosening his brushstrokes and trying to capture the light and atmosphere of the city.
Much more impressionist, and he exhibited these too, so it wasn't just big paintings that he was showing. He was showing these alongside at the Impressionist exhibition. What do we have next? Oh, hello. So we're not going to talk a lot about this, but we're happy it's back in the building. That's a start. And we'll be happy when it's back in 201. But seeing this painting, seeing people just dropping dead in front of it, you know, going to Paris and going to the Getty, and when just the people were just like, it's an awe-inspiring painting. For, you know, we don't really know how it got here, except it was bought from a New York gallery. But it's just, this is the culmination of all of that studies, of all of that thinking about the city as a grand stage for different types of people. Unfortunately, we don't know the identity of this couple. We would love to, but you know, we don't. We'll get to identities in a few minutes. But when we saw it, do you want to show the next slide? Yeah, yep. You can drive. So in Paris, it was on a periwinkle blue. Did anyone see it in Paris? Okay. I didn't like it.
It flattened it out quite a bit, I think. It just wasn't the right color to draw out those really warm tones that he put into there.
We have it on a kind of silver blue in 201, and we will return it to that. But when we saw the Getty installation, the middle slide, and we saw it on this kind of burnt terracotta, it really did something different. It's instead of being kind of sweet, it turned more old master. It was like a real salon painting. It had a kind of golden glow to it. And so we thought we were going to put ours on a kind of silver, and then we thought, let's do something different. So the freestanding walls in the exhibition are all white, but we surrounded it with a much deeper color, and it really does make it look crisp and different. So all three of these installations changed the way we experienced that painting, and it was just incredible to see that.
Truly.
Well, let's move on, though, because we're we're doing okay.
We are. I think we're doing good.
Okay.
Yeah, so after kind of painting all of these up-close street scenes where you can tell he's really walking the streets, in 1878, after their mother dies, Martial and Caillebotte sell the family home and they sell the property in Hyères, and they move to an apartment on the Boulevard Haussmann, very close to the newly built Garnier Opera. It was a very fashionable address for two young bachelors. At this point, he kind of withdraws a little bit from the streets and likes to still portray Paris and experiment with views of Paris, but kind of from the comfort of his own home. And they were on the 4th floor and had a very long, extended balcony, which you can see a little bit here. Gloria also got into that one.
I'm in the footsteps of Caillebotte. I'm on the balcony of Caillebotte.
But he was able to kind of get a new perspective of this city that was so important to him and was so important to his personal experience, and was able to kind of invite his friends onto this extension of his own home to experience Paris from above.
It is crazy, though, because see those little kind of birdie things next to his friends who have been invited onto this wraparound balcony, which was kind of a new phenomena, that you'd have a balcony that wasn't just a grill work that you could go out onto and look at the city. But those little birdie things, they exist. They're little vase things. Everything is exactly like this. It's now a major bank, the biggest bank in Paris, Société Générale. And so again, talking our way into a balcony.
Yeah, it's just so great to see that it is so similar to what he experienced at the time. But this kind of elevated viewpoint also allowed him to experiment quite a bit with perspective and led to some of his most radical compositions, including Boulevard Seen from Above. Here, he was looking straight down and getting quite a bit more abstracted than most artists were getting at the time. He was really interested in just kind of getting the feel of looking down.
These were unique to Caillebotte, these viewpoints, and Degas was kind of jealous. He's like, oh, he's doing balconies. He got there before I did. But, Degas was doing balconies from the ballet. He was doing balcony too, but this is a new kind of balcony this is the Haussmann apartment building, 6 floors with that kind of mansard roof for the chambre de bonne, and then these wraparound for the more expensive apartments on the 4th and 5th floors. There I am. But for me, one of the more fascinating reversals in the exhibition is that Caillebotte's painting the rowers. He's painting men as men. He's interested in athleticism. He's very comfortable in his masculine identity, but he dares to put males in situations in the domestic interior that were normally seen as the purview of Morisot or Cassat, the old trope that women can't go out into the streets, so they're going to paint what they have around him. For him, it was not because he was restricted. He was a male. He could go anywhere he wanted. It was because he found his interior for experimenting. He loved that. And he experimented with his very close friends. So these are not models. These are people, probably this same man in both of these, Richard Gallo. You see him 6 times in our exhibition, and he's kind of like that figure that, okay, I'll put him here, and he's little, but not as little as he appears in the painting on the left. He's never that small. I mean, that's Tom Thumb. And so Caillebotte is just having a really interesting time of it with this woman who's just looming in front, and she's reading a newspaper. So women reading newspaper and a man reading a novel, that is totally flipping the trope, what you would expect. And that sofa, as you saw in the exhibition, for those of you who've seen it, that divan, becomes almost like one of the characters in these narratives that he is setting up, these genre scenes that he's setting up for artifice. And on the right, it's the same thing, the same two people. Now they're acting like the woman's looking out the window, kind of a Friedrich romantic way, and he's reading the newspaper, and it was, if you saw that, you can probably read what the critic wrote. He said, when the distance between them is so far, it's divorce is inevitable. The difference is in scale. And divorce was still not allowed. It was going to come in a couple of more years, but it was in the air. People were talking about, how do I get out of this marriage? And so the critics read into these paintings, as we all do. This is what's so fun about this exhibition. He sets up these narratives without telling us what the punchline is. And so we come to it with our own 21st century thinking about it. And that's what I think we've tried to do, is really not guide you into one narrative, but let you experience it and come up with your own stories to tell. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So again, I think we mentioned this a little bit earlier when we were talking about some of the street scenes, but fashion was something that was incredibly important to Caillebotte. He often used clothing and accessories to really individualize the figures in his figure paintings, to show their class status, where they may have worked. And that was something that we really wanted to pick up on and have a little fun with. So we were able to kind of go through and find historical examples of these hats that show up again and again throughout Caillebotte's work, to really identify his figures. And a lot of these we were able to find very nice historical examples of that. Distinctive helmet-looking straw rower's hat. We searched and searched and searched and could not find an example of it anywhere. And so we actually were able to get a local artist and milliner who teaches here at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago to reconstruct a facsimile for us. And it turned out so cool.
She just happened to have 19th century straw in her studio. We're like,
Already.
Are you kidding me? Okay.
She was ready to go.
Yeah, she went to the opening. She was so proud. Okay, now we need to get to some male identity. Some of the work,
Yes.
This is from Megan's research along with Scott Allen from the Getty. They've done an amazing job.
Yeah, one of the biggest contributions to the catalog was we went through and we were able to identify almost every figure in Caillebotte's portraits. And throughout the course of our research, we were able to get kind of unprecedented access to the family photographs, to kind of match up who he paints with what they actually looked like, which is quite fun to be able to have that one-to-one comparison. And so this is an example of a family member. This is Eugène Dauphren, who was a relative of Caillebotte's mother, who often visited the brothers after the death of their mother and was a pretty avid collector of Caillebotte's art. He really supported his nephew in that. And then this here is Henri Cordier, who was a distant cousin of Caillebotte's. They were close growing up. And this is a really good example of him really using the pose and the background to show the personality of his sitter. So Cordier was a professor of Chinese culture and Eastern languages in Paris. He lived in China for quite a while and was one of the foremost authors on Chinese culture in France. He wrote incessantly, and you see him kind of crouched down in front of his desk.
We can't figure out how he's sitting. It's like, is he on a stool?
Feverishly
What's going on?
working.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to kind of see how he interprets his sitters' personalities as well.
And I think what's fun when you're looking at these portraits that you're going to be talking about, where is the artist? You know, where is he sitting? Where is his viewpoint from? Because for these, we don't have drawings. We don't have those preparatory drawings we had for all the people in the multifigural ones. So it's you know, it's really fascinating. We just don't have enough information.
Exactly. And one thing that was really special is we were able to go through and actually identify the man in several paintings as Caillebotte's close friend and notary, Albert Courtier. He hadn't previously been known as Albert Courtier in these paintings.
Right.
As you can see, the title of this is just Portrait of a Man. They were quite anonymous. Also, the one that we showed a few slides back of a man in a cafe is also Albert Courtier. You can see the resemblance of his very funky mustache that shows up
Kind of
throughout.
jowls. Yeah, he's kind of jowls. Yeah.
But Albert Courtier, they grew up together, and he followed in his father's footsteps and was the family notary, and he handled both of Caillebotte's wills and the distribution of his estate following his death, so he's a very important figure in Caillebotte's life.
And he's in Caillebotte's interior. He's in that apartment that he lived with his brother. And you can tell because they have these kind of silver blue walls with this gold filigree outlining the woodwork of the walls. And he's putting them in a quite, you know, effeminate setting. You know, it's like you think about Mary Cassatt or someone that would do a woman looking out the window, meditating.
Staring dreamily out.
Staring dreamily. And you can recognize the balcony grill, which we've seen in the wraparound balcony painting. So you get to kind of know, because it's such a reduced area, you kind of get to know where he's painting.
Exactly. And then this is Paul Hugo, another very close friend who collected a lot of Caillebotte's work. And this was a particularly fun photograph discovery because he appears to be wearing the same outfit that he is in Caillebotte's painting. You'll see the kind of polka dot vest that he has on, the waistcoat there with his outfit. And then, again, this is Jules Richemond, another childhood friend. And again, you really see that he has invited these men into his space. This is the brother's apartment. You can tell from the gold boiserie, the molding on the walls, and then the red velvet chair is also the same one that Courtier was posing in a few slides back.
He's big. He's a lot bigger than most of them, yeah. And wasn't he a baker?
No, that was Dubois.
Oh, that was Dubois.
Yes,
he was a baker. What was he?
He was, he just had generational wealth. I don't know that he actually had a job.
A lot of these men are just hanging out in Caillebotte's home. You know, that's another thing that sets him apart from the other painters. These are not people that are posing. They're just there because they don't have to work.
They just had all the time in the world.
They don't have a family.
To come and sit for a painting. Why not?
Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. So I just wanted to show you, this is what you're experiencing when you go through. I think it's one of the most innovative uses of Regenstein, and I thank Samantha Grassi, who was our designer in-house, for having come up with this idea, because she really loved the idea of opening up the windows onto Jackson Boulevard, where we're going to see NASCAR next weekend, but just, you know, whatever. But also being able to kind of stroll and feel like when you get to the portraits, you're in a home with a kind of a suggestion of that woodwork, and then the inner sanctum, which for those of you who have been to the exhibition, you know what that is, where we show the naughty bits. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, these are really incredibly innovative and never have been seen before type of showing the female and the male nude. They are not nude, they're naked. These are incredibly realist expressions of the woman on the divan, where the divan is just, you know, bigger than she is taking over that divan that kind of is shape changing throughout the exhibition, and her vulnerability, and him, you know, again, people that were in his entourage. We know that in the last 12 or 13 years of his life, he had a female companion named Charlotte Berthier, who may have been an actress who is not accepted by the family, to whom he gives a small house on the final property in the suburbs and gives an annual salary in his will so that she is taken care of. We don't know anything more. That's the extent of our knowledge
Exactly. She is listed in a census as living with him, and she is simply listed as an ami, a friend.
Yeah.
So the nature of their relationship is still quite murky. There's just not much evidence of how they met, how long they had been together.
It's the family, as you'll see, they kind of cancel them out, cancel her
It's
out
quite
because
scandalous. They
Yeah.
never married. They never had children.
They never married, yes. But also in these death certificates and things, it's so, I mean, Rene, it's just he dies, 25. There's no, and with Caillebotte, it's congestion cerebrale. We think, brain congestion, so probably a stroke. But also, he is listed differently in different censuses. Sometimes he's a painter, sometimes he's an amateur, sometimes he's a proprietaire, an owner of property. So it's really hard to get deep evidence.
Exactly.
When you're
There's just
looking at
not
these
much record.
official documents, and because there's very few images of her, we don't know. And we don't know who this gentleman is either, but we assume he's one of the boating companions that living on the property outside of Paris, and it's showing him in a very intimate space that, male news, maybe they're like Aikens and they can be bathing by a river, but to show a man at his bath with the bathtub there in these silvery, wonderful colors, and it was shocking then, and I think there's kind of a frisson when you go into that little intersanctum, that even today it's sort of like, oh, okay. Wow. So, and I just want to point out one thing, because when you're looking at this painting, which I adore, from Minneapolis, for which we had to sacrifice our Moulin Rouge of Toulouse-Lautrec for 13 months, but we won't go there.
Yeah, if you've been wondering where it was, this is
And
why.
if you're wondering where Van Gogh's bedroom is, that got the male nude. So we had to do our horse trading, as we are wont to do. But anyway, look at the waistband, where the corset was. So her clothes are just thrown up on the sofa, and she's got just the details. And those indentations don't last very long. So he's really emphasizing the quickness with which she is disrobed, and he's showing that and just that. And I just find that amazingly, I mean, talk about a realist painting, but at the same time, the brushwork on the sofa is just a tour de force. It's virtuoso.
It truly is.
Yeah.
No, it's a fantastic painting.
Worth our Toulouse-Lautrec?
100%.
Okay. Okay.
And then we kind of get into the final period of his life. So his younger brother Martial marries in 1887 and moves away. They end up selling the apartment, and Caillebotte kind of moves full-time to the country estate in Petite Gennevilliers. And it's really here that he begins to shift his focus from painting a bit. He paints until the end of his life, but he has largely stopped exhibiting. At this point, he no longer exhibits with the Impressionists. He and Degas have butted heads one too many times, and he can't put up with it. And so he begins to kind of shift his focus to his other passions, of which there were many. He begins gardening, has quite an extensive garden and greenhouse, and then his great love towards the end of his life was sailing. He would race yachts, and he not only raced them, he would also design them himself, and he had a shipyard on the property where he could oversee them being built. And in this painting here, you see one of his most well-known yachts, kind of cheekily named Roast Beef, in English, too, which is very interesting. He met a lot of new friends towards the end of his life through the sailing club that he was a part of, including Émile Lamy, who you see here, who was very important to him towards the end of his life. And Petite Gennevilliers it was very important to him. The relationships that he was developing there really saw him through to the end of his life. And you can really see also in these paintings, he has fully embraced the Impressionist style. His colors are much more vivid. His brushstrokes are thicker. He has really evolved into a full Impressionist by this point in his life.
Yeah. Well, and he had collected Monet. Monet his water paintings. So he knew how to do the way Monet does water reflections, and he's showing that he kind of channels Monet towards the end of his life. Both of these are interesting in personal terms. The two young men are the children of Lamy, who you just saw, and there's Caillebotte talking to Lamy. But these are big paintings. So it's very personal, and the one on the left was made for his brother's apartment. So he's still very close to his brother, but because of Charlotte, who Martial's wife apparently couldn't stand to have her around, she's not around. And so there's a kind of a blank spot there that we don't get quite the familial continuity that we had when he was living in Paris without Charlotte. So let's go on to we are going to make it. We're only a couple of minutes out. Yeah, we only have 2 more slides. We're good. You want to talk about Paul? So Paul wasn't at Paris, but we think he should have been because he's male.
He's just fantastic.
And it also shows the title is in gold, and remember the men painting the wine shop, the gold letters, the woman at the window looking at the hotel across the street, Canterbury, gold letters. I mean, he loves these kinds of patterns and decorative effects and the elegance that he imbibes, that's sort of showing the cushions in the home. And he really loves patterns that he uses. So Paul is happily a good boy waiting for a treat.
Yes, a very, very good boy.
Yeah.
No, but it really just is one of those paintings that really does showcase Caillebotte's personality. I mean, in a lot of photographs, the self-portraits that we see, he's very serious, very kind of drawn a bit, but he really did have quite a sense of humor. He was very social, and this shows like how important even his pets were. He had multiple dogs and loved spending time with them and his friends on their country property, loved being outside.
And he was godfather to several. He was godfather to Renoir's first son, Pierre, and 2 other people, Paul Hugo, you saw him earlier. And so, I mean, he didn't have children himself, but he really loved children and dogs. And just to give another side to his personality that sometimes I think gets overlooked in the just quick biographies. So we're going to end with this wonderful photo as the exhibition ends, because I think it's really poignant that from the get-go, when he was 28, he's writing and he's saying, I want this collection to be part of the French state. He wanted it to go to the Louvre. He wanted to see Impressionism be on the same scale as Delacroix, as Courbet, as the artists who went before. And so here you see him at the Louvre with his favorite bergère, his shepherd. And I just think it's a good way to end this conversation, and thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you so much.